Hello, everyone. Good afternoon. My name is Juliana Ojeda, and I am the Program Associate at Green 2.0. I am excited to welcome you to Empowering Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion through Affinity Groups and ERGs. Affinity groups and employee resource groups play a crucial role in initiatives to foster inclusivity within organizations. These groups have emerged as pivotal components cultivating workplace environments that celebrate and create a sense of belonging for all. They provide safe spaces for dialogue, mentorship, and advocacy, empowering individuals from marginalized communities to thrive in their professional journeys. Today, we have the privilege of hearing from leaders in these groups across different organizations as we explore how they contribute to staff wellness and what role organizational leadership plays in supporting affinity groups and ERGs. I have a few housekeeping notes before we start. Zoom captions are enabled for today's event if you would like to use them. If you have questions throughout the event, please put them in the Q&A box. We will try our best to address all of your questions during the Q&A portion of the event, but we keep a log of questions and can follow up with you after. And lastly, you will receive an email by next week with a recording of the event. Before we begin, I want to thank all of today's panelists for their participation in this important discussion and all of you for attending today's event. I will now pass it over to our moderator, Luis, to start the panel discussion.
Thank you so much, Juliana, and thank you all for joining us today to participate in this conversation of how affinity groups and ERGs are helping empower diversity, equity, and inclusion in our organizations. My name is Luis Nasvides Torres, and I go by he and him pronouns, and I am currently the Deputy Director for Advocacy Partnerships at Earth Justice. And for me, affinity groups are really important. I'm so glad to be moderating this discussion because Earth Justice has a very strong history of supporting affinity groups. We have 6 of them at Earth Justice, and one of those is the Latinx affinity group that I am a part of, which is a great space where colleagues can meet other professionals within the organization who share similar backgrounds and stories. And let me tell you, our Latinx affinity group at Earth Justice has been a unique opportunity for us to participate in networking, in mentorship, in training opportunities. And I'm so excited to hear the impact of the affinity groups and ERGs at other organizations. So with that, I want to go ahead and ask our panelists to turn on their cameras so that they can introduce themselves. I want to ask that you state your name, your pronouns, where you work, and I want you to answer the following opening question. What impact have affinity groups and ERGs had on your work life and your career journey?
Awesome. Well, good afternoon, everyone. My name is Janae Turner. I go by she, her pronouns, and I am the Senior People and Culture Business Partner at Ocean Conservancy. And I have to say, being a part of ERGs and affinity groups has been a great experience in my journey. It's really a space where I can let my hair down, or I'm able to engage in cultural and heritage celebrations in a way that I'm not able to always in my HR capacity. Generally, I'm in the space of making these opportunities available for others. But as I've gone on throughout my career, I've had opportunities to actually engage as more of a participant. And it's just so refreshing and rewarding to be able to have an informal setting where I don't necessarily have to be the one helping people have solutions, but I can actually sit back and learn from my peers. And overall just makes my job more rewarding because not only am I able to create these spaces with others, but I'm able to partake in them. And it's a safe space where staff can really feel empowered to share and be vulnerable and to grow.
Hello, everyone. I'm Lizelle Krebs. I use she, her pronouns. I work for the Nature Conservancy, and I lead the Inclusive Employee Investment Workstream at TNC, which includes supporting our 9 ERGs. I was first introduced to ERGs at a different organization, and at the time, I was a new parent and the only person on my team with a young child. And I struggled to balance my career and my home life. And at someone's suggestion, I connected with the Parents Employee Network group And it was really eye-opening that I wasn't alone or isolated in the way I thought I was. And getting to know other moms really kind of changed my entire work experience for the better. And soon after that, I sought out the Asian Pacific Islander Employee Network Group. And it was the first time I had seen others like me who grew up, culturally divided between being Asian and American, have a seat at the table. And I remember they were unapologetic about bringing their culture to work. And I thought, well, then why do I have to hide so much of who I am? And so I jumped at the chance when a position opened up working specifically with ERGs. And I knew after that, I wanted to impact people's lives in a personal way at work so they could support others and bring new ideas just by sharing their personal stories.
Hi, everyone. My name is Daniel Cruz. I work with the World Wildlife Fund, and my pronouns are he, him. And I am an associate specialist on our program ops team. I'm currently the chair of the Early Conservationist Network, which is otherwise known as the ECO Network. And this ERG is comprised of folks who are new to the conservation space. And this could be those who are fresh out of school or people like me who have pivoted mid-career into the conservation sector. My time as an ERG chair has provided me with invaluable experience and exposure. It's allowed me to cultivate both leadership and project management skills, in addition to providing me opportunities to collaborate with senior leadership in substantive ways. And it's also allowed me to foster meaningful dialogue and drive positive change within our organization. Additionally, it's provided me wonderful opportunities to connect with colleagues across the organization whom I normally wouldn't interact with. And I'm very grateful for having the opportunity to both be a part of and lead the ERG. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Very insightful there with your answers. And for our participants who are joining us, I'm going to pose some questions to our panelists here today, and then we will have an opportunity for Q&A at the end, towards the end of the session. So moving along, I have another question. This one's for Janae and Danny. What roles have affinity groups played in building a culture of inclusivity and diversity within your organizations? What benefits do these groups provide to employees from marginalized communities in terms of feeling included and valued within your organizations?
Yeah, I love these questions. I think for me, like ERGs are almost like the cornerstone of your culture. It allows people from different identities, backgrounds, interests to come together in a space where they're not always communicating or connecting or able to learn about one another. And so we are able to have these affinity groups and ERGs for places where people can connect. But additionally, like these groups also provide a unique lens through which we can view the work that we are doing and really improve or enhance the ways in which we are able to implement our mission. And so with our groups, the groups are really beneficial in building us that sense of community, but also developing leaders. It's always surprising, like the different ways in which people can grow their skill sets. And it's not necessarily in your normal day-to-day or your specific goals that you've set in your annual plans, but there's opportunities for people to grow, to develop their skills in an undefined, more personal way where they can really see themselves and have a group of their peers to be able to cheer them on as well and empower them at the same time.
Thanks, Louise. I'll be happy to share my perspective here. In my opinion, affinity groups are like the heartbeat of inclusivity and diversity within World Wildlife Fund. They serve as vibrant hubs where individuals with shared cultural identities can come together, connect, and celebrate their uniqueness. These groups play a pivotal role in breaking down silos that may exist due to job roles, allowing staff from marginalized communities to feel more included and valued. In my experience as an ERG leader, I've witnessed firsthand the profound impacts these groups have on our workplace culture. They provide a platform for amplifying voices, advocating for change, and driving initiatives that promote equity and inclusion within the organization. As a chair of the Early Conservationist Network, our ERG has developed several initiatives that have had a profound impact on our members and the organization at large. We developed professional development webinars that provided guidance on identifying the next steps of your career. We facilitated social events with other ERGs that have connected communities that would not normally interact. We've also developed a new training module that provides transparency in the promotion process for new and established staff alike. In essence, affinity groups and ERGs are not just about creating a more diverse workforce. They're about creating a culture where every individual feels empowered to bring their whole selves to work. And I can attest that being part of such groups doesn't just benefit the members, it enriches the entire organization, making it a place where everyone thrives. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Now, understanding the process by which these groups come to be can provide some valuable insights into their impact and their effectiveness. Lizelle, with that in mind, how do affinity groups and ERGs typically originate within organizations? What factors contribute to their formation and their growth?
Thanks for the question, Luis. I think the most successful ERGs are formed from the bottom up with strong support from top leaders. So I agree, like an employee-led grassroots effort helps identify like the authentic need for a group. And it's really important to understand employees across diasporas and across geographies, how and if an ERG can benefit their community. And I say that because there are a lot of different forms of committees and groups that are valuable at TNC. And the employees themselves should determine if the structure or the expectations of an ERG really fits their needs. And that's all outlined in our ERG handbook. So for instance, we have an Alliance for Diverse Asian Pacific Islander Talent ERG that formed about 2 years ago. And our Asian American colleagues, they began networking informally, but started creating more space for their community after the killings of George Floyd and the anti-Asian hate events during the COVID-19 pandemic. And some of those meetings were informal and some of them were more structured. But eventually the employees had to ask themselves, like, what's next for this group and what projects and initiatives they wanted to lead and how could those align with the goals of the larger diversity team. So those employees were so intentional in building an inclusive group with specific goals, and they officially launched in July 2022. As far as growth, I think it's all about getting the word out and sharing the impact of ERGs. We've included ERGs in new employee onboarding. They're included in various presentations, and we have support from our internal comms team to get the word out about ERG events and ERG leadership openings. And of course, the ERGs have their own newsletters and communities where they, promote their own events and initiatives and also cross-promote other ERGs events and initiatives. And lastly, I mentioned that there needs to be support from the top, and this looks like resources, funding, access to leaders, and executive sponsorship, because I think there needs to be a firm commitment that ERGs are important so that everyone understands that their work is really important to the health of an organization. And I think that inspires other people to get involved.
Excellent. Now, Janae, research indicates that organizations with active affinity groups and ERGs are more successful in attracting and retaining diverse talent, positively impacting the organizational culture. Why do you think affinity groups help attract and retain diverse talent within organizations?
That's a great question. I think at a very basic level, representation matters. People like to be able to see themselves in their workplace. They want to know that the organization that they are potentially coming into values diversity, equity, and inclusion, and the justice and belonging, and all of the great aspects of a blossoming and inclusive culture. So people want to be able to see themselves. They want to know that they can and will be valued and seen and heard. And then additionally, there's the aspect of having varying levels of impact. And at Ocean Conservancy, what we have been doing in our still kind of beginning stages of our ERGs is really empowering our groups to be able to define the level of impact they want to have and how they want to be recognized and incorporated into messaging and having a space for their voices to be heard. And also being a place where not only they can just have conversations amongst themselves, but knowing that because leadership is also invested in the success of these groups, that they have a space to be able to impact and influence policy change. And so additionally, once folks are able to see like, okay, I can see where I can be myself, I can thrive in this environment, their culture is not so much just focused on a culture fit, but a culture add, right? Knowing that there's more that you can bring to the table. There are also opportunities where you can celebrate and not have to hide your identity. And we also really are intentional in making sure that at as many touch points as possible, that new staff and existing staff are aware that these groups exist. So that continual promotion, whether it be at staff meetings or whether it be on our intranet, there are multiple touch points where people are able to be involved and make a decision of what they would like to do to further advance these groups. I think lastly, one of the things is like, as far as retention and recruitment, when you're trying to make sure that there's a place for you, it removes that fear of wondering if you will be accepted, because you know there is a place for Black, Indigenous people of color, or you know there's a space for single parents, or you know there's a space for the LGBTQ plus community, right? There's a barrier of like, I don't know if I'll be accepted, that gets removed when you're able to see the org's commitment to having these safe spaces.
You know, some of the comments of our panelists are reminding me how important it is to have these affinity groups. And at Earth Justice, we have our Latinx affinity group space where our members, they have these really meaningful conversations about identity and about just working in the environmental space, perhaps from a perspective of being Latino, right, or Latina, and it's just been a really meaningful way to kind of work through challenges sometimes and offer support to our peers. And at our affinity group, we also help increase awareness through the programming of our Heritage Month during the year, which for our community runs September 15th through October 15th. And we take a lot of pride in organizing, identifying speakers, and working with our DEI department to bring that programming to Earth Justice and to have it available for anyone who wants to participate. Danny and Lizelle, I wanted to ask you, can you share examples of successful initiatives or programs led by your affinity groups that have positively impacted your organizational culture?
Sure, Luis, I'll be happy to chime in here. So, in my opinion, affinity groups are a powerful catalyst for driving meaningful change within organizational culture. Now, I would love to share an example from my own experience that has shown the tangible impact that my affinity group has on fostering a more inclusive workplace environment. Last year, the Eco Network had an incredibly successful collaboration with the People and Culture team on a special workshop that addressed promotion issues within World Wildlife Fund. Now, the promotion process can be a very sensitive topic, but recognizing these prevalent challenges around transparency and confusion in the promotion process, our collaborative efforts led to the development of a comprehensive workshop that addressed the concerns of individual contributors and management alike. This workshop tackled the issues from both perspectives, clearly delineating each role in the process. And both sessions were exceptionally well received, providing much needed transparency and clarity around the promotion process within the organization. Building on this success, we are currently in the process of developing a second iteration of the workshop, which will be seamlessly integrated into our quarterly trainings. And this initiative not only addressed the immediate concerns, but also laid a foundation for sustained improvement of our promotion process going forward. And this effort mirrors the collective work of all 12 ERGs at the World Wildlife Fund. These groups are each doing commendable efforts. Each group is actively developing initiatives that are contributing to a rich tapestry of community within our organization. And these initiatives serve as platforms for meaningful conversations, increased awareness, and tangible actions towards a more inclusive workplace environment. By leveraging the unique perspectives and experiences of diverse groups, we are driving positive change at every level of our organization. In essence, these initiatives led by Affinity Groups are not just impactful, they're integral to the journey towards a more inclusive workplace. And as we continue to collaborate and innovate, I have no doubt that our collective efforts will pave the way for an even brighter and more inclusive future at World Wildlife Fund.
Daniel, that's fantastic. Congratulations there. I have several examples about successful initiatives around, meaningful conversations and increasing awareness. I'll mention that first there was an effort by our League of Employees of African Descent, or what we refer to as LEAD, that resulted in our Race and Racism caucuses. LEAD was hosting some honest conversations, which were about the Black experience at TNC. And after George Floyd's murder, they had brought a proposal to TNC leaders to hold these caucuses, which were a series of, professionally facilitated listening sessions that included, more than 1,000 staff from several countries. And the result really established kind of a baseline of our work on racial equity. So everything from like the need for a more diverse donor base to like historical acknowledgement. And while there's still work to be done, those caucuses really served as a baseline for our conversations. Our multicultural ERG, they lead a project called Humans of TNC, which has the likeness of Humans of New York, popular book. And this is an internal project to showcase the diversity of our employees and really uses the power of storytelling. So our multicultural ERG interviewed staff between 2017 and 2022, and they collected and shared stories of almost 80 colleagues from around the world that helped increase visibility of the cultural differences at TNC in a really beautiful collection. And, that's a way for our employees to feel included and seen. And they've since started a new project around sharing recipes. So I'm very excited for that too. I can go on and on, but the last one I want to mention is some like supportive conversations that were started by Stigma Free, which is our ERG that focuses on valuing people of all abilities and also mental illness. And during the COVID-19 crisis, Stigma Free began hosting these weekly calls to discuss what their members were going through in a very open and supportive, non-judgmental environment. And they collaborated with HR and our safety team on documents to make sure that they were being, compassionate and used inclusive language in the calls. And they've since continued to connect and support each other with whatever mental health and caregiving struggles that employees may be experiencing. And these have continued, and it's just a great place for employees to feel like they're heard. And just recently, they started hosting open discussions calls in Portuguese to reach out to our colleagues in Brazil as well. And so I think that has really made an impact on having more employees feel included into the culture.
I could also,
Thank you so much. And it's been great to hear a lot of these examples here. And I think, Janae, did you want to jump in as well?
Yeah, I did. Sorry about that. I just wanted to maybe speak to folks who may be joining us today who are just getting their groups off the ground. And so I can speak to that because I think what Lizelle and Daniel have shared are beautiful initiatives. But I think for us at Ocean Conservancy, where we've started is just celebrating. And in being able to just celebrate the identities and the culture of the groups that we have has just been the spark of being able to provide connectivity and engagement opportunities. So for example, we have 3 ERGs right now. We have our BIPOC group, which is called See Our Stories, SEA, for the ocean pun, of course, as well as our Spanish-speaking group and our LGBTQ plus group. And for Hispanic Heritage Month, one of the initiatives that our Spanish-speaking ERG wanted to do was to have a happy hour where they all brought in particular cuisines from their different cultures. And it was eye-opening. There were people who came in and engaged with them and learned about their cultural cuisines, and it was all delicious, by the way. But it was just an opportunity to come together to learn something that's unique and special to the people who are at our organization, and to just like kick back and enjoy and let them just see the joy that comes from sharing their stories of like, my grandma used to make this, or my aunt taught me this recipe and it's been passed down from generations, and this is how our culture celebrates it. So there's the beauty of this conversation and us being here is it's like our groups go through different evolutions, and that's also the fun part of seeing how you can start with the celebration and let's just be together, let's celebrate who we are, to all right, now let's figure out how we're going to change this place, let's figure out how we're going to be or create more of an impact and have influence, and talk to leadership and talk about how the challenges of being a Black woman in conservation and how the space is often limited and there's not a lot of us here. What does that mean? What can we do as an organization to create more opportunities? So the evolution of ERGs, I think, is for me also one of the highlights.
Thank you. And now we know that despite all these great examples of successful initiatives and programs, we often see that affinity groups and ERGs face challenges gaining that recognition and that support from organizational leadership sometimes. Lizelle, what are some of the challenges you are encountering, and what can be done to address them, in your opinion?
Yeah, it's a great question. Well, I'm sure here, we're all facing like environmental crises, and we have a lot on our plate that goes across like all of our employees. So I think sometimes ERG work maybe isn't prioritized by managers or leaders in the organization, but really, as we've said here, ERGs help create a work culture that is needed for everyone to do their best. And so it's important for leadership to send this message, to understand the message, and then to help promote this message. So one of the things we've done at TNC is we've piloted a new executive leadership team sponsorship. So in addition to the ERG's executive sponsors that our ERGs work with, who serve as mentors or advisors for the ERGs, each of our ERGs also have a sponsor at the highest level of our leadership. And these ELT, we call them ELT members, so executive leadership team. These members are attending more ERG events, like our recent All ERG retreat, and they're getting to know the specific goals of the ERGs. And I think it's important to have like our highest leaders involved with the ERGs to help bring along more managers or supervisors to recognize that ERGs are a priority for TNC, and that allows more people to get engaged because now they have the endorsement from the highest leaders. So I think that has definitely helped us at TNC.
Excellent. The next question here is for Janae and Lizelle. Organizational leadership plays a vital role in supporting the sustainability and growth of affinity groups. What strategies can organizational leadership employ to ensure the sustainability and growth of affinity groups within your companies?
And I can kick us off with this one. Money, continued and sustained investment. but also making sure that we allow for the time for folks to be able to engage in these groups. And then additionally, I would say creating pathways for the ERGs to be heard. So really being intentional about creating communication flows, creating opportunities for the groups to have access to leadership, to share their concerns in a formal way, but also informal ways. And then leadership really being a champion for the groups. So not only within these spaces where staff are, but externally to spotlight the great efforts of the groups and share success stories. I mean, everyone loves a good story. And so being able to speak positively of the impact that these groups have had on them as a leader, but also on the business, right? The impact of the mission work. I think additionally, what leadership can do to help ensure the success of affinity groups and ERGs is to involve them in the messaging. And that's one way we've been able to connect different staff across the organization, involving our ERGs in our cultural celebration so that they're able to share their own stories of why Juneteenth is important, why is Pride Month important to me, and able to connect in a different way. So it elevates their voices without necessarily the message always coming from leadership.
Yeah, I'm just going to really build off of what Janae said, because I think effective sponsorship is one of the keys to supporting ERGs. I think it does little good if the work that's being done by an ERG is done in a vacuum, right? So executive sponsors, they really need to be able to share the real examples of the impact ERGs are making. And, you know, they often have the influence and the power to uplift ERG communities in circles that are sometimes otherwise not accessible, and maybe influence their peers to see how valuable and impactful ERGs are to the work in the workforce. So, you know, for any executive sponsors listening, you know, get to know your ERG's goals and talk about them to your peers, or when opportunities rise, or when, as Janae said, like include it in your communications, or get to know your ERG leaders and refer them when you hear about like career advancement opportunities. I think a sponsor's role is to open doors, and that can be a really powerful way to show your allyship.
Thank you. Now, one thing that's been coming up in the chat here is communication and collaboration. And I wanted to ask the following question to Lizelle. What does effective collaboration between ERGs and organizational leadership look like, in your opinion?
Wow, that's a good question. And we have so many great things that have come from collaboration between our ERGs and organizational leadership. And you know, some of our ERGs have been around longer than 10 years. So to Janae's point, you know, there's been time to foster these relationships, to have more collaboration. I do have a few examples for our LGBTQ plus community. You know, our Nature's Pride ERG and our Women in Nature ERG, they came together to address some real safety concerns that our employees who identify as a member of the LGBTQ plus community face in certain situations and in different countries where we work. And so they collaborated with our HR team, and they created a supplement that supports like our Global Equity and Safety Handbook, our international travel program, and other SOPs. And they developed for our employees like an easy to understand FAQs for LGBTQ staff addressing equity, privacy, and safety for them. In 2022, our Stigma-Free ERG, again, that's the group that focuses on people of all disabilities. They worked with our legal team and our leveraging our lands team, and they helped put together a 2-day workshop on accessibility on our lands. And that included spotlighting some of our state chapters and business units on working to address accessibility on our properties and some of our preserves. And that resulted in a community of practice and ongoing discussions. We have like a young and emerging professionals and an evergreen ERGs. They've worked together for years on building a two-way mentorship program. Our veterans ERG works often with our HR team to prepare, veterans coming from the military life and transitioning into work. And so there's been a lot of partnership with that. I mean, we really have had a lot of fortunate opportunities where TNC can tap into the ERGs and where the ERGs can tap into each other's, different perspectives and have a seat at the table to provide leadership with new perspectives too.
Now, this is as for Danny here. Allyship within and outside of affinity groups and ERGs is also crucial for promoting systemic change within organizations. What roles can allies play within and around affinity groups and ERGs? Are the specific policies and practices you follow around the inclusion of allies in these groups? What are those, some of those policies or practices?
Thank you, Louise. That's a great question. So the World Wildlife Fund doesn't have specific policies that address allyship. Our code of culture provides a framework for the principles that are central to diversity, equity, and inclusion. And a component of that culture is allyship. Allyship is indeed a cornerstone of driving systemic change within organizations, and its importance cannot be overstated. I feel that allies can play a pivotal role in amplifying the voices of marginalized communities within and outside ERGs. As the philosopher Plato once said, courage is knowing what not to fear. And allies demonstrate courage by standing up for inclusivity and justice, even in the face of adversity. By actively listening to the experiences and concerns of these communities, allies can gain valuable insights into systemic issues and work alongside them to effect positive change both within the organization and outside of it. In essence, allyship is not just about being present. It's about actively listening, empathizing, and taking meaningful action to support marginalized communities. And as allies, we have the power to drive systemic change and create a more inclusive and equitable workplace for all. So let us cultivate the courage to be allies and the strength to effect positive change together.
Thank you, Danny. Now, for Janae, identifying key metrics or indicators to measure the success and impact of affinity groups and ERGs on DEIJ efforts is essential for evaluating their effectiveness. What key metrics or indicators can organizations use to measure the impact of affinity groups on their diversity and inclusion efforts to ensure the voices behind the data are being heard and are being centered?
Yeah, this is a good question. I think when you're trying to capture data and measure impact, it's important to look at qualitative and quantitative measurements. And so at a very basic level, like you want to know who's coming, right? Who's attending? How often are you getting together? And I also like to ask the question of what can the organization do to better support your group? I find that that is often very eye-opening and also helps to steer leadership in a very clear, concrete direction of, okay, this is now our next step. This is what we can do to elevate, highlight, spotlight, advance these groups. And I think another point is to collect success stories. You really want to know what is the driving motivators for people to come together. So what is exciting the members of your ERGs? How has their involvement and engagement helped to expand their understanding of others or even of themselves? And then additionally, looking at and measuring belonging. So from these groups and participating in these groups, how have they influenced their sense of belonging to the work or to the team or to the mission at large? And then I think there's another possibility to also tie performance indicators into looking at your ERG leaders. There's, like I said, there's a great opportunity for folks to develop their leadership skills, but you also have to assess that things are going well with those leaders. And so it's a good opportunity to be able to collect some 360 or peer feedback, and also incorporate that feedback into their overall annual performance, as a way to give the leaders credit for the impact and the change that they are able to have and be a part of as they are leading these groups on. So those are just a few different ways in which people can measure the impact of these groups and hopefully make a good case for future investment.
Thank you. Now, the next question is for all of our panelists, for any panelists that would like to jump in. We've gotten several comments in the chat. In smaller organizations where resources and time might be limited, what strategies or approaches would you recommend for initiating and sustaining these groups? I can briefly share that at Earth Justice, we initially started off as a group of about 4 or 5 colleagues who got together, who we would go out to lunch from time to time. And we started just essentially having our little lunch group where we'd go out and we'd try a Mexican restaurant or a Salvadorian restaurant or what have you. And we'd take turns picking a restaurant and going. And out of that practice, we decided to create a space where we could do other things like coordinate perhaps like what conferences we would go to, and also what speakers we could recommend to our DEI department. I'm imagining that at smaller organizations, that could be a similar strategy. Have folks create lunch groups, have folks coordinate what conferences might be good opportunities to travel to together. I want to just give a shout out to the Green Latinos organization who puts together a summit every year. And that initially was our meeting space for Latino staff at Earth Justice that wanted to network and have a space to meet and just have an opportunity to interact with people of similar backgrounds. That was initially our space, and so it was outside of our organization, but that was a space that still exists today that could be something that other organizations could participate in. So those are some thoughts that I wanted to share on that. Wanted to see if some of the other panelists had something to share as well.
Yeah, I'll jump into that, Lisa. I think that those are great suggestions. I'll just remind everyone, I think, especially in the conservation space, not everyone has to be, a large group, but we're all doing very similar things. TNC just recently started working with some of the ERGs. Some of our ERGs have reached out to ERGs and other organizations because there are common experiences and there's still a way to network, within the same industry, maybe not in the same organization. And I think that's a great way to, exchange ideas, suggestions, best practices, and perhaps, come up with other ideas on how to even keep a small group sustainable.
Yeah, I think continuing to just thrive off the organic nature of why we want to come together, and being intentional about how you're able to maximize your time. So it's not like you're going to start meeting every week, right? But maybe it's once a month, maybe it's every other month. But having a defined time that works for the majority of the group, I think is one great approach. But also being able to have access points to additional resources outside of the organization to know what's possible. So there have been a number of groups that our staff have engaged with, like the ERG Leadership Alliance, or there are a number of other ERG experts out there to give you roadmaps for how to start in the beginning stages of your groups and then grow into larger, greater, impactful opportunities.
Excellent. I think we're going to go ahead and jump into our Q&A at this point. And I see that we have several questions here in the chat. And my apologies in advance if we don't get to all of them, because we do have quite a bit. But I will popcorn around and share the questions here with our panelists so that we can jump right in. So one question we have here is, are there example ERG affinity group charters that can be shared? I'm curious about how they formally and informally work with the rest of the organization, and how much power do they hold, if any? Also, how do we create spaces that are safe and brave for participants? Would any panelists like to jump in on that one?
Sure, I'll be happy to share my perspective on this, Luis. First of all, great question. I know at the World Wildlife Fund, we do have a general charter for the ERGs that was drafted by the People and Culture Group. However, each individual ERG also has their own separate charter, which is usually drafted. I know with the Eco Network, we drafted that internally amongst our members and our chairs and officers. As far as the power that gives you within the organization, I can't really speak to that. I mean, it's really limited to what the ERG, the main umbrella ERG charter establishes. But I think it's a good framework for showcasing just what the ERG can accomplish, what its role is within the organization, and what its remit is to its members and to the organization as well.
I could jump in. I think we're similar to WWF. We have sort of a handbook for all ERGs to abide by. And then if an ERG is to be formed, there's sort of this application process, but the ERG determines their mission, their vision, and then they're also their charter, and also they provide like a strategic plan. So at TNC, we fund the ERGs, which I know is not common, honestly, across ERGs in any industry, really. And so they do have some autonomy on how they can use that funding for their own initiatives and programs. To answer the question about power, I think the power really comes from collaborating with the larger diversity team and other leaders. And I say that because, ERGs they're like some of the most engaged employees. And what we don't want to do is burn them out by giving them such an incredible task. I mean, we all want the culture to be inclusive. We all want a better experience for the employees. And it's really not fair to just put that on the ERGs. So we really recommend, we really push for a collaboration of how the ERGs collaborate with our larger diversity team and others, so that, they can still have fun and they can still do what's important to them. And it's not all this additional work on their shoulders.
I have to agree. We form or we are able to foster influence by leveraging our JEDI task force, who is essentially the body that oversees our ERGs. So it's still being able to share concerns, questions, ideas with a group of people who are also closely engaged with leadership, as well as people in culture. So I think having those through lines with your HR team, with your leadership, with your EDI, DEI body is really important, because you're able to funnel up that information. And again, to Lizelle's point, remove that burden of trying to make your case and be heard. There are people who already have access to those avenues for your voice to be heard.
Thank you. Another question that keeps coming up is regarding pushback. And so I want to read this question. It says, what tools and strategies would you recommend for overcoming potential pushback from leadership on launching and supporting ERGs due to budgetary restrictions?
I'll be happy to chime in here as well, Luis. I think at the end of the day, it doesn't cost anything to foster community. And if there are budget restrictions on funding ERG activities, but there's still a reasonable enthusiasm there to foster community within the organization, then you should just go ahead and do it, regardless of the budgetary constrictions. That community, as we've discussed several times throughout this panel discussion, just having that ERG, that place for marginalized communities to connect and be themselves and bring their whole selves to work vastly outweighs the budget that ERG could obtain. So I think if there's a need to bring community to an organization, just go ahead and do it. And if there's a budget, great. But if not, the community is far more important.
It's also an opportunity to be creative with existing budgets, right? For some teams they have a lot of travel, especially to some of our different offices. So really think about, okay, where am I going? Who is there? How can we leverage that existing budget to be able to create opportunities to connect?
Yeah, I couldn't agree more with my fellow panelists here. I would say, another angle to maybe pitch is like the idea of leading an ERG really is a unique professional development opportunity. And there's value in that as well. That doesn't take budget at all, but it is an experience that's an investment in your employees.
We have another question here. I'll read it straight from the box. It says, for folks like me who only get to use 5 to 20% of work time for our ERG, but spend the majority of time in an entry-level role, how do you all deal with imposter syndrome and activist burnout?
That's a tough one. Really got me thinking.
Actually, I was going to while you think through that one, I wanted to just share that oftentimes the affinity group itself serves as a recharging sort of pad for me, at least when I enter that space and I already feel a certain way about, let's say, what my contribution is to the organization. For example, I go in there and I see other people similar to me and with similar backgrounds as me, and I get so inspired by that, and I get very motivated to continue doing the work that I'm doing, and I just feel, oh yeah, I belong here. And I think some ways of dealing with that burnout or that imposter syndrome that may come up is by being in that type of space with other people who share your interests and who are cheering you on and supporting you. Because at the end of the day, that's really the type of culture that helps everyone really with burnout and any other sort of questions they may have about their contributions.
I think also too, when you are early in your career, and because you do have that time baked in, like you're already winning. So take advantage of it, right? And there is space for you. What I often try to tell early career professionals is there's always an opportunity for you to make an impact because you have a different life experience than somebody else. So, and that's something that they may have not even considered, or just the basics of being from different walks of life, right? So you always are going to have something to contribute. So I would say, you know, as much as you can, remind yourself that you have something of value to add to all of the spaces in which you occupy, and to enjoy this moment as an early career professional and walk into those spaces and share your story.
Now we're getting towards the end of our call, but there is a question here that I think would be great to hear from our panelists, good to hear a response from our panelists, which is, what has been the best part of being a part of an ERG affinity group in your organization?
For me, it's been learning from others, even who share the same identity and cultural heritage. I'm amazed just how the similarities also, you know, hilarious, but the difference is that we all, the uniqueness of our experiences, it opens my eyes to fellow people of color and Black women, and just understanding that there is beauty even within our own differences, and to be able to spotlight that, to laugh about it, to get emotional about it sometimes, or even to learn. I often like to go back and look at our people who've come before us. So there's constantly some type of history, historical aspect within our See Our Stories BIPOC group. And so just learning about the impact of our own lineage and people from our similar descent that they've had in this space is it's always the joy for me. Learning something new is always the joy for me.
Yeah, I'm the same. It's really the connection. This is I'm totally remote, so I sometimes feel very isolated. And so the connections I make with all the ERGs, and hearing their passion and their ideas and their stories is just very inspiring for me. And it's something that, you know, I love to hear these stories. I love to think that maybe I facilitated like a personal impact on someone. And I think that's what keeps me going. So it's just been a great experience for me.
Just to build off of the excellent answers from Janae and Lizelle, I think the best part for me, being a chair of the Eco Network, has been just being part of like a wider community and just giving me the opportunity to participate in collective action in improving the organization in some way. You know, we've launched a lot of initiatives over the past few years that have had real impact on people. And, you know, folks have sent me Teams messages and emails and come up to me in the halls and just, you know, talk to me about how great that last workshop was, or how nice it was to listen to that consultant's webinar. So, you know, that just hearing that there's been a direct impact from our work has been really rewarding. And I'm so grateful for having the opportunity to be part of that experience for them and to help facilitate it as well.
Well, this concludes our presentation today. Thank you so much, Janae, Lizelle, Danny. Thank you, Green 2.0, and all of you for joining us in this conversation. We hope that you have enjoyed all the insights our speakers have shared with you, and we hope to see you at the next presentation. Thank you very much, and have a very good day.